Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first expansion for Mille Fiori, known as the Masterpieces. In this expansion, you're going to be adding a new sideboard, some new types of cards, some new scoring opportunities. It's a very high-scoring, point salad, combo-rific type game. Let's head over to the table. I'll show you what is different about the expansion. I won't go into a full rules overview, but I'll show you how the expansion changes things up. Then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, here you see the entire contents of the Mille Fiori Masterpieces expansion box. You've got some score markers because the scores are going to be going up a little bit higher, at least the potential is higher, so those are ways to track higher scores. You've got 4 new player markers, which are going to be over on this board. You've got this new extension board, which I'll show you in a moment. You've got these tiles, council tiles, that are going to be going randomly along this board, and you've got a new deck of cards that's going to get split into 3 at the beginning of the game when you are playing with the expansion. You're going to shuffle all of these decks. This is going to go shuffled into the main deck of cards that have this same back, and it's going to be a combination of these Masterpiece cards and Dogate cards, and I'm probably mispronouncing these. These have not been shuffled yet, but you can see Masterpieces and Dogate cards here. I'll talk about these in a moment. You've got Dogaressa cards, which again, I'm potentially mispronouncing. I'll show you how these work in a moment. And then you've got Masterpiece cards. All right. So this is the entirety of the contents. Let me show you what it looks like kind of set up with the game. I'm going to let you know right now, this is not going to be an overview of how to play the game. I'm going to assume you know how to play Mille Fiori. I'm only going to be talking about the new elements added with this expansion. Okay, here you see the new board and card set up next to the main player board, or excuse me, the main game board here. I'm going to keep it off center because really we're only going to be talking about what's going on over here. This is where the bulk of the changes are going to go. There are some overall global changes to the game that you incorporate when you're playing with this expansion. Number 1 is that regardless of player count, you're going to turn over 9 cards out of the main deck to be off to the side of the board towards for your bonus cards. And so that is different. 9 cards no matter what the player count is. Also, if you're playing with 2 players, you're going to be playing with 4 cards like you would in the other player counts. That does not change as well. The other big change is that this Doge card, which denotes the first player in the base game, would move clockwise at the end of a round. That does not happen now. Now this card is going to be changing based on people that play these Doge cards or the Dogaressa cards, and I'll explain that in a moment. All right, so those are kind of the global changes in the game that you will incorporate. Let's talk specifically about the different elements, starting with this small council board. Okay, so looking at this small council board, there are the 6 tiles that are randomly placed on here at the beginning of the game, and all of the players start with one of their markers on the very bottom level. What you're trying to do is move up this track to gain bonuses and eventually, hopefully, get some points as well. You are going to be able to do this in one of 4 different ways, moving up the track in one of 4 different ways. First is by playing a card associated with the tile that you are on. So every one of these areas out on the board are represented with a tile except for the dark blue harbor space over here. So this first one happens to be the light blue area. So if you play a card for this area and you put out your token there, you also are going to move up to the next unoccupied spot on this tile, and you're going to gain the associated bonus. So if blue later on played a light blue card, they would jump forward and go here. I'll talk about those bonuses in a moment. Okay, so every one of these has a corresponding tile except for the dark blue. That's one way you can move up. The next way you can move up is by playing one of these Dogate cards. All right, it's going to tell you how far you move up the track, and some of them will have points, some of them will not, but in this case it's telling you move up 2 spots on this track. So you could potentially move up. So that's the second way. A third way is by one of these Dogaressa cards. This one, if you play it, not only will you get the points associated, but you can move 1, 2, or 3. This is the only time you get a choice, is if it gives you this kind of 1, 2, or 3. Otherwise, you have to move as far as it tells you explicitly. So that's the third way to move up. The fourth way is on this extended board, there are some C route areas that will also allow you to move 1 or 2 spaces. So those are the 4 different ways you can move up that board. Once you have started moving up the board, you're going to get potential bonuses. You might get a masterpiece card, like it shows here, where you would get one of these on display or top deck it. You might just get points. You might be able to draw one of these Dogaressa cards. Again, one of the 3 on display or top deck it. Here, you can get 5 movement on the seaboard. However, if you stop on a bonus spot like this, you could not take that bonus. All right? So those are the different associated bonuses. Also, the first ones to get to the top are going to get the associated point bonus going in descending point value. So that is the small council board. I mentioned briefly these Dogaressa cards, so let's talk about these for a moment. When you get these cards, they're not played immediately. The way these work is that on a normal turn, you would take a card that you have drafted and turned face up, and instead of doing the action of that card, you would discard it and do whatever it says here. So in this case, move 1 or 2 or 3 spots on the small council board and get 3 points. You might just be able to get 15 points. Okay, so again, you are playing these instead of the original card that you drafted and would normally play. That's how the Dogaressa cards work. The C route has changed a bit in that now what used to be the last space on the main board is now just a regular space that will do what it normally does, 10 points and a bonus. But additionally, you can continue along onto this new area of the seaboard. So it would go from here right onto here. We've already talked about what the different bonuses are here, moving up the small council board, a masterpiece card, bonus actions, things along those lines. And also, you have 4 spots here for the order that they get there if they do get to this endpoint, and there are bonus points associated with getting to the end of the C route as well. The last new element we'll talk about are the masterpieces, and so the masterpiece deck is here, and it's made up of 9 different types of masterpieces, 3 different shapes, each of which in 3 different colors. And each masterpiece is worth between 2 to 5 points. There's 3 different ways that you can get one of those masterpiece cards. You can get them on these council spaces, so that's one potential way you can get them. You can get them on the C routes spaces, and also there are some Dogaressa cards that will allow you to get 2 masterpieces at once. When you get a masterpiece, what you're going to do is you are going to start a 3x3 display in your player area, okay? Once you place a card, you can't move it. However, you can put cards on top of other cards if you wanted to change them. So when you play a masterpiece card, you're going to place it into your display. You'll get the associated points that are printed on the card, and then you again are setting up that 3x3. Can't move them once they're placed, but you can cover them. Let me just show you, I'll kind of clear this away, and I'll show you the example, or a potential example that someone's might look like and how they would get scored. Okay, so let's say, for example, this is one player's display of their masterpieces at the end of the game. You're going to score at the end based upon each column and row in your display. You're going to get 10 points if you have 3 masterpieces of the same color in a line, 10 points if you have 3 masterpieces of the same type or shape in a line, and then 20 bonus points if you have the same color and shape. So let's just go through these. This top row is going to be 10 points because you have 3 horses, although they are of different colors. This row, you're going to get 20 points because they're the same color and the same type. Nothing for this bottom row. You'll also get 10 points for having 3 green cards in this column. Nothing for the other 2 columns because you don't have the same colors or shapes. That's how you score masterpieces at the end of the game. Otherwise, the game is going to play the same. If you go above 100 points, you've got these new scoring markers. You can go from 100 to 200, 300 to 400. And the player with the most points is going to win Mille Fiori with this new Masterpieces expansion. Let's head back and I'll let you know what I think. All right, so that was the Masterpieces expansion for Mille Fiori, a game that I like quite a bit from one of my favorite designers, Reiner Knizia. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the art and components, and it's different because it's an expansion, so you know that the art style is going to be continuing on from the original game, and I found the art in the original game and in the expansion perfectly fine. It's nice, it's pleasant, it's very much a kind of a standard Euro style art going on, and I'm fine with it. Now the pieces, the kind of plastic pieces, there are only those new player pieces that are added to this, but they also look good. I think that's the most impressive part of the production of this game, are those kind of translucent colored plastic pieces that are representing the glass. The cardboard tokens are very good. The sideboard works just like you would expect, so no issues there at all. I do want to point out a couple of things. Number one is that the box is huge. It is absolutely oversized for the amount of material in the box. That's not unique to this expansion. That happens all the time. It actually was the case with the base game where the box was larger than it needed to be. But now it makes it a little bit better because all of this easily fits within the base box with room to spare in case there are other expansions as well. So just pointed that out. I will not be keeping the expansion box. Number two is that the card backs are slightly different. That really only applies to the cards that get shuffled into that main deck. There's a slightly different color to the back. One is slightly darker than the others. I personally do not find this to be a huge issue. I mean, your mileage may vary on that, and I felt like it was important to note in the confines of this review, but I don't think it's the type of game where having the knowledge of it being an expansion card or not is going to make a huge amount of difference. It's a drafting game to begin with. Again, I don't think it's a huge issue, but I did want to point it out. There is a slight variation in the color of the card backs in the expansion to the base game. Otherwise, I feel like the components and the art are very good. Let's talk about the gameplay. That's what it's really all about. So this expansion adds a few things, and let me just talk about them all individually. First of all, I love the small council board and those tiles that you place randomly along that board. It is, first of all, it's adding, a different kind of track to a Euro game, and I do like tracks in my Euro games. This is going to allow you to kind of also have a new point of decision when you are choosing a card to draft. Because as I mentioned in that overview, if you play a card that is the same color as the tile you are on, you move up. That's one of the 4 ways you can move up the small council track. And so if you have a couple of cards and you're kind of 50-50 on them, if one of them is the same color as the tile you're on, it makes it easy to make that tiebreaker and go, all right, well, I'm going to do this because not only will I get the benefit on the board, but I'm going to get another benefit based upon where I land on that small council board. So I like that quite a bit. I really like how the turn order changes with the expansion as well. The fact that it is a much more dynamic change of turn order, that depending upon cards you play are going to determine who gets that first player marker, where in the past it used to just pass around clockwise at the end of a round. Now, when you play a Doget or Dogressa, I can't remember the name. The 2 Doge cards, they're going to get you that first player card. And so I like that. It can really be an important timing element of the game. So like those cards quite a bit. I like the Dogressa cards. I like how they allow you to, they kind of mitigate a time when you might have a hand and none of the cards are terribly compelling to you. Yeah, this can give me 3 points. This can give me 4 points. Well, if you've been banking 1 or 2 of those Dogressa cards, you could just discard that card. You won't be using it, and you use the much more powerful, beneficial Dogressa card. I like that a lot. So that is one of the elements of the game that I think really improves. I will also say that what is interesting is the element of the expansion that I'm least excited about is the one that it's named after, which are the masterpiece cards. And it's not that there's anything wrong with kind of what they do, that little 3x3 grid, that's fine. The only really negative there is it adds quite a bit of table space now. But it just feels a bit disconnected from the rest of the game. Whereas all of these other elements of the expansion feel like they are very, very tightly integrated into the game. That feels a bit disconnected. However, I have a strong sense that that was a big part of trying to make this a game that scales better. One of the biggest complaints about Mille Fiori, the base game, was that it didn't scale terrifically well. Specifically, the 2-player game was weaker than the 3 and the 4-player game. I would not argue that. It clearly was. There have been some house rules and unofficial variants that have been proposed, and just about everyone I've seen was some element of shrinking the board, making it so that things are more tightly contested, to have a little bit more angst on your turn in a 2-player game. This expansion kind of paradoxically or counterintuitively expands your options, and I think it makes the 2-player game better. You would think that maybe it wouldn't, but I feel like it does, in my opinion. I mean, your mileage may vary on that, but I feel like the 2-player game is better with the expansion because now you've got more things that you have your focus on, okay? If you find that you just can't compete with a particular area on the board, well, you can focus on those masterpiece cards. You can focus on the Dodressa cards. It just gives you more of a deeper decision well to choose from. So I feel like not only is it good in the 3 and 4-player game, but in the 2-player game, I think it especially improves that experience. I will say that I think that the expansion, as oftentimes happens with expansions, does raise the complexity of the game a bit. Not outrageously. It's a midweight Euro game, and some might say light midweight. That's quibbling, but with the expansion, it's clearly a midweight game. I would have to know the people that I'm teaching the game to well and have a good sense for what their comfort level is with these types of Euro games to determine whether I would introduce them to this game with the expansion for their first time playing or not. In many cases, I would probably just play with the base game once, just so they can get an idea on how things work. A couple of things can be a little bit tricky, especially the shipping area of the board and the way that the draft maybe works a little different than they may have seen before. But certain players I know would have no problem at all playing this with the expansion the first time. That's going to be probably based upon your knowledge of the people you are introducing the game to, whether you would introduce it for the first game or not. That being said, I feel like this expansion is outstanding. I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10, a seal of excellence. Strangely, while it is excellent, in my opinion, I'm not going to say it's essential, okay? I think those are two different things. I feel like the base game itself is very, very good as it is. I think that the expansion adds a lot more good stuff. And so I would be surprised if there are a whole lot of people that like Mille Fiori and dislike the expansion. I'm sure that there will be some people that maybe feel like it takes away from the tightness of the board or what have you, and that might just be a personal preference. But I think most people that like Mille Fiori will like this expansion. And I think that the only time it would really go into the realm of essential is if you're playing it with 2 players. Then I think I would strongly recommend playing with this expansion. So there you have it. Mille Fiori, the masterpiece, is an 8.5 for me. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from the Dice Tower Midwest Annex.